workshop. Today we are focusing on the bifurcation and chaos. It's a more mathematically oriented session all day long. And just to welcome you today, and remember that during the last 15 minutes of each talk, the chat will be open for your questions. So please just participate and send any questions that you want the speakers to answer. And without more delay, I would like to introduce Josep, which is going to be the coordinator or the chairman of this second day. Josep, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Santi. Welcome, everybody. Today we are starting the second day of the conference. This is the Tuesday of Bifurcations and Chaos. And our first speaker is Lluís Alzadà. He's at the Mathematics Department at Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. He's also at the Centre de Recerca Matemàtica. He's also a member of the Dynamical Systems and Computational Biology unit that CRM has with the I2 SysBio. And his main research interests are dynamical systems, especially discrete dynamical systems. He is very interested in applications of dynamical systems theory, in mathematical modeling, and numerical methods. And he's also very interested and doing some research in artificial intelligence and optimization algorithms. So thank you so much, Lluís, for accepting our invitation. And please, you can start your talk that is titled Dynamics in a Time-Discrete Food Chain Model. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Josep. I will try to share, instead of one presentation, one screen, because there are some movies attached, and I don't know exactly which will be the behavior of those movies. So I will try this. Okay. Do you see presentation at this moment?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So instead of thanking me for accepting invitation, I should thank you for inviting me to give this talk in this very interesting session. Maybe the first comment is that you will see that slides are reused from a recent talk from Tomás Lazaro, which is one of the co-authors of those two works that I will present here. So we are reusing slides. Those slides are very good, and this is merit from Tomás Lazaro, and there is no need to change them in such cases, so I'm reusing. The only problem in these reusing slides is that when Tomás was quoting works inside of the slides, he was omitting his name and putting my name, and I should do exactly the contrary. So I will give credits to this when it arrives the moment. Okay, so this is a joint project, as you see, based on two papers with more or less the same co-authors. In one of it, there is Ricard Soler, additionally, but the other four authors, they are the same for both papers. And here you see the list of implied people, the list of people involved in this. And the outline of the talk is, there will be a first introduction, very short, very quick, about continuous predator-prey models. And then we will go to the part where our two works fit, which is for discrete trophic chain models. Maybe I will first go to Lotka-Volterra model, which is a classic. This is a model on differential equations, and you have it here. And there are some criticisms to this model. This model, the part that we are interested in, or that it's close to us, is that it's used to model predation and parasitism. Everybody knows what is a predator and parasite, but if not, it is written here. And in ecology, the study of such models is very important because in many species, the dynamics is a crucial factor of ecological processes. And the behavior of many species cannot be understood without studying environment, other species which can be enemies, etc. And also such models, they are used for biological control, which is introducing new species and other parasites to control undesirable species. So we see that these kind of models, they have kind of two meanings, explanatory and also as a corrective models. Our interest on such models, I would say that it comes from two sources. The first and maybe main source is understanding, as it is written here, to understand the functioning of a species. It may happen that we need to understand the coordinate evolution of a whole niche, a whole set of species and environment. And this is what we try to understand. So the first thing would be understanding. And the second motivation, which is maybe not so important, but for us it was very motivating also, it was to explore up to which extent tools on dynamical systems, I should say simple tools, but the simplicity here is not required, although it is welcome. Simple tools on dynamical systems can help in understanding ecological features. And we like to say that the conclusion of those works is that dynamical systems help strongly, and bifurcation analysis, of course, help strongly in understanding this joint behavior of several species. Okay, maybe to say also in this introduction, later I will justify that we go to the discrete case, maybe to say that the models that we are going to consider, they are, in some sense, they are toy models. They are pretty realistic, although, but in some sense, they are toy models, where we wanted some simplicity of equations to check whether with simple equations we can capture very complicated behaviors. This is what in some areas in dynamical systems are called geometric models, which means that models that in principle they are not realistic, but in practice they reflect, they agree very much with reality. And we claim that this is the case of the models we are considering. Maybe they are not realistic in principle, although they are based on ideas of Lott-Campbell-Terra equations. And later we will consider Leverrier model, which is based also on this. So as I'm saying, those models, we don't know how realistic they are, but they are geometric in the sense that they happen to capture very much the real behavior. And the important thing is that the apparent simplicity of the models, they help very much in doing the analytic study. Okay, this would be more or less the aim of the talk. So one of the models, one of the inspirational models will be the Rosenzweig-MacArthur model, which can give a graphical representation of a predator-prey interaction. This is, as you see, this is a two-dimensional model in differential equations. And as it's possible to see in those two-dimensional models, it's already possible to see already a lot of things, although one of the criticisms would be that the environment, the whole system is not rich enough. Okay, another inspirational model, this would be for the three-dimensional model, is this extension of the Rosenzweig-MacArthur model, also for differential equations, which roots to chaos have been found by Deng and Heinz. And there, the strong assumption that there's a drastic time diversification in the trophic chain. In fact, there are homoclinic connections of Shelnikov type, which this implies always that there exists chaos, although I don't want to be very technical. Okay, so those would be continuous model inspirationals for the model we are going to consider, and we are more interested in discrete models, which are the good models for non-overlapping generations. Those are discrete. Discrete means discrete in time. The evolution in time is discrete. And for instance, univoltine species, which means they undergo one generation per year, they can be very much studied with such kind of models. In the working group, we had many times the discussion about what is easier, whether the discrete models or the continuous models. There are opinions for everything, and we have this recurring discussion. Okay, in any case, both kind of models capture most of the feature, but they have some differences and some recommended differences. So the use is recommended in slightly different situations. In any case, we were thinking in univoltine species, and we chose to work in the discrete setting. So pioneering works in this area is the classical work of May in '74. This work was very important because it was one of the first examples of an application of dynamical systems to understand the functioning of a system, and that it had consequences as correcting or as political consequences. So May used this work in the study of the herrings of the North Sea, because there was a problem, a fishing problem in the North Sea. So the amount, so the populations of herrings, they had decreased very strongly. And thanks to the careful study, he was able to recommend some policies, some period of stopping fishing and recover the populations of herrings in the North Sea. This was one of the first examples of, say, very strong application of dynamical systems and correct policies consequences. Then there is this work of Allen, Schaffer, and Roscoe in '93. This other work of about chaotic dynamics in insect populations, which has been extremely motivating for us in '97. Okay, and finally, one model that has been very interesting for us. It's this Louvre work in 86, which is a kind of logistic model. You see in the first equation the quadratic function. It's a two-dimensional model where the variables x correspond to preys and the variable y correspond to predators. Okay. K is the preys carrying capacity, and mu and beta are parameters which are the intrinsic reproduction rates respectively. And this model, which is a variant of the previous one, you see is with the carrying capacity normalized to 1. Of course, you can do this, but this implies a rescaling of parameters and also of the variables, of course. Okay, and mu and beta here, in fact, they are parameters different from the previous model. So this is a model that we are extremely interested in. And we are also interested in the extension of this parameter to dimension 3 to have a prey, a predator, and a super predator. Okay. So this is again some comments about this Louvre model. Here is the case where you see that since I am using the transparencies from Tomás Lazaro, so he is quoting me as a co-author, but he is not quoting himself. This should be changed. Where it says Alceda, it should say Lazaro instead of Alceda, and I should not quote myself. Okay, and this would be the other model I said, the extension, where we have, as I said, we have a prey, which is X, a predator, which is Y, but we are adding a third element, which is the super predator, which is Z. And as you see, the super predator consumes or interacts with both the prey and the predator. Okay. So, as I say, those are geometrical models in the sense that we wanted them to be very simple, but we believe that they are pretty realistic. This is the interest of those models, that with very simple dynamical tools, it's possible to drive realistic conclusions if you believe that they are geometric in the sense I told you. Okay. So for the Louvre model, what is the conclusion? You see here an example of a particular species that they can be studied with this model. Here you see the scheme of interactions between species that justify the equations. And you see at the right the graph of two different possible behaviors. Okay, the top one is this is of course for different values of parameters. Is a very simple case where the two populations stabilize in a coexistence. In a peaceful coexistence, and also for other values of parameters, we see that there is chaos. Okay, so this is a model that hopefully in nature we would be in the top situation. Otherwise, it would be difficult to observe the evolution of the model. But as we see, this is a model which is complicated enough, and perturbations of parameters, they can lead to complicate behaviors and things that they are not usual from the point of view of observing stable situations. So the parameters domain, the natural parameters domain is take mu between 0 and 4 and beta between 0 and 5. This is not motivated by biological reasons. Here, there is no discussion about which would be the real parameters for this species. Simply, this is those range of parameters. They are obtained by thinking for which range of parameters the model has sense, and it has some invariant set. It has some region where some dynamics can occur. Okay, for values of parameters mu larger and beta larger, it is not clear that there exists dynamics at all. So this is say a theoretical determination of range of parameters. And the dynamics, of course, it is defined, the space, the space to study, of course, is the simplex, x plus 1 smaller or equal than 1, okay? Because here in this version of the model, we have normalized carrying capacity to 1, and this means that both populations, they can be at most 1 altogether. Okay, so the thing that I said about applying dynamical systems to those models and try to understand what is the behavior of those models means that we develop the basic theory of the basic and sequential theory of dynamical systems. We just start first with fixed points. Remember that we are in discrete case. Okay, I'm not talking about critical points or stationary points because we are not in differential equations. So fixed points, then local stability, then using Hartman theorem to determine local stability. Then we can start thinking about global behavior, about bifurcations and so on. Okay, so this is more or less the scheme to understand the dynamics. So this model, it has 3 fixed points, which are the 0, 0, the 1 minus 1 over mu, and the third one with more complicated formula. And what happens is that those fixed points, they do not exist always. So the 0, 0 is, it exists always for all values of parameters, but P2 exists only in the for mu ranging from 1 to 4, and for beta different from 0. In the beta, it can be any value, but mu has to be larger or equal than 1. And last fixed point, P3, it exists only in this domain I am writing, 5, 4, 4, and mu divided by mu minus 1, 5. Okay, so the beta range of this fixed point depends on mu. So this would be the basic skeleton of the dynamics of this model. And the base to understand the local dynamics. And also, when I am writing such equations, this would be where populations can stabilize in the top model. So the 3 candidates to give a graph like the top one drawn here would be those 3 fixed points when they are stable, of course. Okay, so more information about the 3 fixed points. So here you have the ranging space for the 3 fixed points. The left in the left picture, you can see the whole parameters space. So you see that beta ranges from 0 to 5 and mu ranges from 0 to 4. And we see the regions, the existence region for the 3 fixed points, okay? So P1 exists all the time, but P2 and P3, they do not exist in the green band at the left. So P2, it exists for mu larger than 1, as it was explained, and P3 only exists in the reddish zone in the top right corner, okay? The second picture explains the the behavior, the local behavior of the fixed points, and the P2 yes, the second picture explains the behavior of P2, and the third picture explains by zones the behavior of P3. In the top right corner, you see that the point P3 is repelling spiral. In the green zone is attracting spiral. And in the other two zones, in the blue zone, it is hyperbolic. It's a hyperbolic saddle, and in the brown zone, it is a node. Is a stable node. Okay. And okay, those are fixed points and local stability. And so a very interesting question here that it can be studied. It's interesting for both models, the two-dimensional model and the three-dimensional model. But in the two-dimensional model, it is easier and it can be studied better. So I will devote some time to this, the question is, which is the largest invariant set where dynamics live? Okay, so I said that the place where the dynamics lives is the simplex, so which are the points where x plus 1 is smaller or equal than 1. But this doesn't mean that there are trajectories, there are points that they can visit this whole space. And here it is a question. This is a question over the table. Every point can be the initial condition for a set of populations with the only restriction that x plus y is smaller or equal than 1. And what can we say about the global dynamics when we know already the local dynamics? And what about the chaotic behavior that it has been observed numerically? Can we explain where it is? So the first question to this is, the first approach to this, to the first question is where or for which values of parameters the simplex is invariant. Invariant means that the image of the simplex for the model is contained in the simplex. So in this case, we would have that every possible point in the simplex would be a possible initial condition, and the dynamics would occur in the simplex, and it would fill all the simplex. The question is that the simplex is not always invariant, as one can expect, and here you have a characterization, a description of the image. Okay, the image of the simplex is the set of points of the whole simplex is a set of points such that x divided by mu plus y divided by beta is smaller or equal than 1/4. Okay, this is very easy to prove from the equations of the model. Okay, and then observe, this makes those pictures clear. Okay, so this tells us that there is a distinguished line in R2, which is the line x divided by mu plus y divided by beta, smaller or equal to 1/4. And the first image of the simplex is below this line. Okay. So after the furthermore, you have a better description of what happens in the three regions determined by this line. Okay. So a first proposition that it can arise from here is that the simplex is invariant if and only if beta is smaller or equal than 4. And then in this case, the image of the simplex is the whole simplex. Sorry, the image of the simplex is equal to the simplex only for mu equals 4, beta equals 4. And so for beta smaller or equal than 4, but where this condition is not verified, the image of the simplex would be strictly contained in the simplex. And the explanation is absolutely graphical. You have it here, okay? So the image of the simplex is in the black line zone below the line x divided by mu plus y divided by beta equals 1/4, which is here is this line that it has a certain slope. And so this explains why there is this is for the case you see that beta is between 4 and 5. So we are outside of the invariant. This proposition is very easy to prove, okay? And the question would be what happens in the non-invariant case. In the non-invariant case, beta must be larger than 4, and here it is the picture. And you see in the left picture, you see clearly from where it comes the red region. You see in the top left corner that there is a part which is below the black line, which is this line that I am the line x divided by mu plus y divided by beta equals 1/4, which is outside the simplex, okay? So this means that there are some points in the simplex whose image is outside of the simplex, and this is the red zone, okay? And to understand very well the invariant set, we have to study the evolution of those two objects. I mean the simplex with the red zone, which is the escaping zone, with the image of the simplex, which is below the line x divided by mu plus y divided by beta equals 1/4, to study the evolution. And you see that one critical moment is in the middle picture, where there is tangency here. This is the moment where it is created a second bit to the simplex, and it is created a pre-image of the escaping set, and then the escaping set it has two zones. So this red thing would be the one-step escaping set, as it is written here, and this is the mechanism of creating the two-step escaping set, okay, which is absolutely geometric. I am explaining this because, as you can see, all this is produced geometric with very simple equations, and this explains that we can prove things here. In fact, here we have been using, and this is the first time I have been using something like this in an applied model, we have been using Sturm sequence to prove that the blue curve surrounding the red zone is a function and the behavior is like this, okay? So the proposition for the result for the escaping set is this one. When beta is larger than 4, that we know that the simplex is not invariant, there exists a unique value, which is mu star, which is a critical value between 0 and 4, for which this curve, that is in the second line of the proposition, and this line intersect at a unique point. This is the middle picture here. Okay, this is what it explained the statement. Then this set, the set S minus the one-step escaping set, is T invariant for every beta larger than 4 and mu smaller than this mu prime. Okay, so what is explaining this proposition? It is explaining exactly those three pictures here. So maybe I go on because time is going fast. So unfortunately, this is a thing that it can be studied analytically, which is the first stages of formation of the one-step escaping set and the two steps escaping set. But if we want to characterize completely escaping set, this requires more strong analytical tools, and this is a aim that we have in the future, but we did not work in this. And then numerically we can describe the objects. And here you have the set where it takes place recurrent dynamics, which is the complement of the escaping set, or it is the non-wandering set using language of dynamical systems. Okay, this is the intersection of the preimages of the this is the intersection of the images of the simplex. Okay, and this is what we have here, and those are plots numerically. This is the region where the dynamics occurs for different values of parameters. And here there are plots on how the escaping set is formed for different regions of parameters. Okay. And here we can have a movie. Now let me see how this behaves. Okay, so this is the movie on the formation. So how those escaping sets are formed. Okay, of course, this is done numerically by iterating points and successively removing points which escape after some iterates. So first we remove the points that escape at the first iterate, then we remove the points, sorry, I should. So did you see the movie, sorry? Yes, because it was in the screen. Yeah, you see the movie, okay? So observe that first you see the points which escape in the first set, the second, the third, and so on. So additions in the pictures are points that they escape after more and more iterates. And this is how the final pictures are pictures where all points that escape for some iterate, they are removed. The fixed points, they are clearly seen with big balls of certain colors, okay? So I really continue. So about global asymptotic attractors, we have that if mu is smaller than 1, P, the first fixed point is a global attractor. Then if we define this curve phi, then P1 is also a global attractor for some points, for some initial conditions, and then P2, okay? So first P1 is a global attractor for mu smaller than 1, then the global attractors are P1 and P2 for certain, depending on the initial conditions, in this region, in the region 0, 5, 1, phi of beta. And then, so this is the red curve is the function phi of beta, okay, which is 2 up to 2, and beta divided by beta minus 1 from 2 to 5. You have it here. And after this, it is the chaotic region, the chaotic behavior. So if we are looking for chaotic behavior, it has to be found above this equation phi of beta, okay? Above this equation phi of beta, which is in the reddish zone. And here you have some images about this chaotic behavior, okay? So some different images about Lyapunov exponent and bifurcations in this chaotic behavior. Okay, I go very quickly since I should stop now. Josep, how much time do I have? 0 seconds, maybe?
No. So we have a couple of questions, so perhaps you can spend 10 minutes more.
10 minutes more. This is enough. I think that now I will go very quickly because in fact this is a 3-dimensional model, but basic features, they have been explained before. And here the only difficulty is about the dimensionality. Dimensionality both of the phase space and the parameter space, okay? So the differential things to say with the previous model is that, so here you have the model, here you have the parameter range, which is 0, 4, 2.55, 5, 9.4. Also, this has been determined theoretically from the point of view of zones, the region where we have interesting dynamics, okay? And here we have the 4 fixed point of this model. So the 0, 0, 0 is always a fixed point, but we have 3 more points. And to understand the fixed points, which are the skeleton of the dynamics, it is useful movie which I have here. Okay, we'll start the movie again. This is a movie of the evolution of the fixed points, all the fixed points changing the parameters, okay? And here you see the 4 fixed points while changing the parameters, okay? The pale colors, it means that the fixed points, they are outside of the space where the dynamics occur. And it seems that there are only fixed points, but there are 4 fixed points, because as you see, the green one, which is P1, which is the 0, 0, 0, doesn't move all the time. It's fixed all the time, okay? And this is, so here we are following a line, a straight line, in the parameters space, in the 3-dimensional parameters space, and this is the evolution of the fixed points. Let me make a comment, and I will come back to the movie again. I want to show again the movie, and where I have now my presentation, I have lost it maybe. No. Where is here? Here, as you see in this picture, maybe we could have seen them in the movie. Here, the dynamics occurs in a space which you see it here in the picture, drawing in pale gray. This is kind of a simplex. I hope that you understand the projection, where in the wall y equals 0, the wall y equals 0, there is a simplex, which is the simplex x plus z smaller or equal than 1. So in the deep wall, there is a triangle which is in the feasible space, and outside of y equals 0, we have a pyramid. We have a pyramid with the center in this pyramid has the center in 1/2, 0, 1/2, which y equals 0, okay? This is where the dynamics occur, and now I am going again to the movie to see better the evolution of the fixed points. So fixed points start outside of the feasible space, only the green one is in the feasible space, then the red enters, and the red moves along the y-axis, and then the blue, so first the brown enters in the feasible region, and it moves in z equals 0, and then it enters the blue with a collision with the brown, that it goes up. And finally we have So we have all the time 0, 0 as a fixed point. We have a fixed point in y equals 0. We have a fixed point in the plane z equals 0, which is the brown one. And then in the feasible space, we have the blue fixed point, which is really the only three-dimensional one. Okay, this is in agreement with the previous model, two-dimensional model. Okay, so this is a thing that I want to show. The next thing I want to show very quickly is in the presentation is this picture. The cube on the right is, as you see, is the parameter space. Beta is in the front, gamma is the depth, and mu is the height. Okay, and those surfaces that you have in this picture, they are more or less foliated in the picture, not in the top part, and they separate the regions of stability of the different fixed points. They are in agreement with the three vertical boxes on the left. The first vertical box is the eigenvalues of the linear part of the system of the first fixed point. The second box is of the second fixed point, the third fixed point, and the fourth fixed point. And stability is when the fixed point removes absolute value larger than 1. Then observe that in the first fixed point, in the first box, there are two blue lines which correspond with the fact that two eigenvalues, they are 0 all the time. So 0 is an eigenvalue with multiplicity 2, and the red line is an eigenvalue with multiplicity line that is stabilized at some point, crossing with 1. And this is what it gives rise in 3 dimensions to the red plane, which is in the picture. So the red plane separates the regions where P1 is stable, asymptotically stable, where the region which is above the red plane, where P1 is not asymptotically stable, okay, because it has one dimension which is unstable. Then, for instance, the yellow curve above the red one is the stabilization of one of the eigenvalues of P2. And of course, as you see, also, P2 only exists above the red surface. This is because in the graph for the eigenvalues, they do not exist below the red surface, okay? So this picture explains very much the existence regions in the parameter space of the fixed points and their stability. This is better explained with this picture where some qualitative behavior is given for the fixed points. Okay, so this is very compact. We call this the super figure, okay, because it gives all the local behavior of all the fixed points in one figure. Okay, since this model is very simple, we are lucky and we can draw this. In very complicated models, this would not be possible to draw it. It would be too complicated. So this is one thing that I want to show. And the next thing is that we have similar studies for the escaping set and chaotic regions. Okay. So simply I will end the talk by saying that if we look for chaotic region, for chaotic behavior, and the zone, the very interesting zone to study the dynamics from the point of view of being very complicated is the upper zone in this picture, specifically the zone J and also the zone I. Okay, as you see eigenvalues in this zone, there are a lot of unstable eigenvalues, and in fact, in the zone J, it happens that all 4 fixed points, they are unstable. So we didn't have time to study this, and this is an open problem, but a very interesting problem for us is to understand very well the local graph of the stability for the 4 fixed points. And there is a question which we call the carambola question, which is whether we can start, whether there exists an initial condition near the fixed point 0, 0, 0, which is unstable now, and then we can go to P1, sorry, to P2, then to P3, then to P4. So arriving to any of the fixed point by the stable manifold and leaving by the unstable manifold, and come back very close to 0, 0, 0. So this would say that there exist initial conditions where the populations get absolutely crazy because they are visiting all, for other values of parameters, all possible stable situations, but here in an unstable visit, okay? But all of them, visiting all of them at the same time cyclically. This is for us a very interesting question about the complexity of the model. Maybe from the point of view of applicability of the model or observability of the model is not very interesting, but about how complicated is this model and how close to the reality it is this model, it's a very interesting question for us. So I think I stop here.
Okay, thanks so much, Luis, for this very nice talk. So we have 3 questions in the chat, and well, you have 10 minutes to answer to these 3 questions, okay? So
Okay.
the first question by Irene Otero is, what are the specific bifurcations that the system undergoes in the transition to chaos?
Okay. I don't know whether this is for the, I don't know whether this is for the 2-dimensional or for the 3rd-dimensional model, but maybe this is easier to understand in the 3rd-dimensional model. Maybe the best answer can be here, okay? As you see, there is essentially Hopf bifurcation at the, for certain values of parameters that then they are hidden below. They occur kind of period doubling bifurcation with probably there are some renormalization structures. Okay, so in fact this is kind of a bifurcation diagram. Okay, and what is absolutely clear, and this is more clear maybe in the, because I didn't show eigenvalues for the 2-dimensional model. For the 3rd-dimensional model, the eigenvalues tell you what it can happen. Okay, so the first thing you have around in lambda 1i is the unstabilization of the first fixed point. So you will have a saddle, you will have unstable saddle, and then it borns the second fixed point, which is completely stable. So this fixed point at the when the P2, when it at its birth, must capture the unstable manifold of P1, okay, around P2, probably spiraling. This tells you the bifurcation occurring at this moment. Okay, so the bifurcations, they get more and more complicated, and they have to do with this local behavior. So in some sense, those graphs of eigenvalues, which by the way, here you have complex eigenvalues in lambda 3, as you see, which by the non-discontinuous line, and they, sorry, by the discontinuous line, and they control how those bifurcations occur. So I cannot answer precisely the question because they occur many kinds of bifurcations. Okay.
Okay. The other question is by Mark Plana, and he's asking, is there a biological relevance or meaning to the escaping region?
Yes, that's Mark. This is a very interesting question. And we had thousands of hours of discussion. And in fact, we had in the group, we have 2 political parties. one in favor of one kind of extinction and another one in favor of another kind of extinction. Here there is the following very deep question. Okay, imagine that you pick an initial condition. Okay, and this initial condition you are iterating and it's jumping 1,000 times inside the simplex, and in the iteration 1001 it goes outside of the simplex. Okay, so my question is whether the initial condition is allowed or is not allowed. Is really an initial condition of the system or it is not. I repeat, okay, you have a point in the simplex, and after 1,000 iterations this point goes outside of the simplex. Okay, the question is, the initial point is a point where the populations can live or not. So there are two positions here. One position is that no, that no population can be there. Okay, if you are in a situation which is feasible from the natural point of view, because you cannot, because you will go to extinction after these times, and so this is not an allowed initial condition. And the second position is that, okay, that the populations, the prey and the predator, they do not know that they will extinguish, they can be there, and after 1,000 iterations they will die. Okay, but here there is still the problem about, which is different, to go to 0, 0, 0, which is extinction, or to go out of the physical space. So here the question is, when after 1,000 iterations you go to places with negative values of the populations, this is not possible. So this is a problem with the model. So the model cannot lead you to negative things. Okay, so this discussion comes from the fact that the invariant, the set of the preimages of the 0, 0, this is extinction, but the set of initial conditions that they go completely outside of the simplex, those are initial conditions where it's not clear that the populations can live in the context of the model. In reality, maybe, but in the context of the model. And this is the justification for the escaping set. The escaping set would be conditions leading to negative population sizes, which is not possible in such a model. So the whole question, and those were the two political parties, is how you understand extinction. What does it mean, extinction, for you? So whether extinction is negative population size or 0 population size, and how you go from one to the other.
Okay, and the last question by Irene Otero. She's asking, do you use a Lyapunov function to prove asymptotic stability? If yes, does it have a physical biological meaning, like, for example, a kind of thermodynamic potential?
I would say no. Maybe you can interpret what we are doing as a Lyapunov function, but no, we are doing direct proofs. So the technique we are using to prove this is that since those models, and this is my explanation about geometric things, they are rather simple, you have inequalities, and you can prove that, you can prove iteratively that there is some coordinate of the feasible space, or some combinations, maybe some equation that combines two values of the feasible space, that they are decreasing, for instance. To prove, I will give a particular example, okay? To prove asymptotic stability of 0, 0, 0, what you have to prove is that when you are iterating, X converges to 0, Y converges to 0, and Z converges to 0. And I do not remember, I think I kind of remember that the easy one to prove is that Z converges to 0, and since Z converges to 0, then you get, by using this, that the other two also converge to 0. So I would rather say that they are direct proofs. because the systems, they are rather simple. Maybe in more complicated systems, Lyapunov functions would be necessary, but here really it was not necessary.
Okay, there is a last question. So Miguel Roman says that I did not understand the difference in biological interpretations, extinction types, or going outside of the physical space and reaching. So this is related with Mark Plana's question. So perhaps you can give 2 minutes clarification about this or opinion. Thank you.
Maybe you can give it to Josep, because in this discussion I told you, Josep and I, we were from different parties here, and we
Yes.
had a very deep discussion about this. So the question, the philosophical question is the following. When you write a model, such a model, and the variables are densities of population, the values of the variables, they cannot be negative. They are simply, this is not possible. This is outside of the model. And in fact, it turns out that those models, they are not correctly written, okay? Because if in this model, for some values of parameters, some X, Y, or Z can become negative, this is outside of the model, philosophically. This is outside of the model. So the question is the following. So let's think in the first iterate. You have legal X, Y, and Z. And then you are iterate, and then X becomes negative. This, it has a relation with this picture, okay, the red zone. The red zone, they are points that after one iterate, they are, so the X plus Y is larger than 1. X plus Y is larger than 1. So if those are densities, X plus 1 cannot be larger than 1, okay? So red zone are points that after one iterate, X plus Y is larger than 1. Then what is this? This is an extinction, or simply this has to be discarded from the model because this has not meaning in the model. Because if you write a model that you say that X or Y are densities and the carrying capacity is normalized to 1, simply this cannot happen, okay? So depending on what you say, philosophically, the escaping set, for me, the escaping set is points that they do not live in the model. So the model is not valid in the escaping set because you are in the escaping set, and after some iterates, you will be outside of the model because the density will be, the total density will be larger than the carrying capacity, or some variable will be negative, so we'll have negative density, which is not possible, okay? Another meaning that you can say is that, say, okay, no, this means that the model extinguishes, the population is extinguished, okay? This is completely different. And for me, this is a very philosophical question, which is not clear yet, okay? But my position is that the escaping set are points where the model is not correct, and they don't have to be considered as the domain of the dynamical system. So for me, the dynamical system is the function plus the complement of the escaping set, which is where the recurrent dynamical system takes place. And I have to discard the models of the escaping set, okay? Because they violate basic restrictions about densities.
Okay, so yeah,
I hope it is completely clear, this, and if not, the working group, we had to spend many hours discussing about this. We can devote some time discussing about this at some moment, because there are things to talk.
Okay, so we have no more time. So thanks again, Luis, for your amazing talk. And now we move to the next speaker, which is Nuria Fagella. Nuria, I think you could try to share your presentation with us.
I stopped sharing.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
One moment, I'm checking, I'm trying to get on a cable instead of Wi-Fi to see if it works better. 1 second, please.
Okay. So meanwhile, just say that Núria Fagella is an associate full professor at the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at University of Barcelona. Her research interests are mainly complex dynamics, but complex dynamics not understood from the perspective of complex systems or chaotic dynamics, but in the sense of dynamics in the complex plane. And mathematicians give the name to these dynamics as holomorphic dynamics. And she will talk us about transient phenomena that will appear in other talks. And the title of her talk is Dynamics Behind Ghosts, Unveiled by Complex Tools. So thanks, Núria. You can start when you want. Okay.
So can you see the shared material?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Chris, could you mute your...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. Thanks.
Okay, so, well, first of all, thank you for the organizers for giving me the opportunity to enjoy my first biology conference. All in all, an exciting experience. So this is the first time that I've worked on this type of models. And it's nice to see how complex variable really can reach so far, right? So as Josep said, this is joint work with himself and Jordi Canela and Luis Alzada, and we explore a particular model a little bit with a different point of view, with a complex point of view, as opposed to real, not as opposed to simple. So basically, I want to talk about one type of bifurcation that we've been analyzing a little more closely, but in general, let's talk about bifurcations for a second. Luis has already been describing many of those, but just to remember that any model like the ones that we are studying these days, any physical model, dynamical system that depends on parameters is susceptible to experience bifurcations. This should be a mu, sorry. So, so mu is a parameter that can be one or more dimensional, and x is one or several variables depending on what is it that you're modeling. And then there are these special values of the parameters for which a qualitative change in the dynamical system occurs. And those are the ones that are called bifurcation values, right? So we all know the bifurcation diagram, for example, of the logistic map, which is a very popular one in biology, in the description of population evolution. And we all have seen many times this difference, these changes, so these parameter values at which we go, for example, from having like one stable equilibrium to having like a period 2 stable situation, right? So this parameter value would be a bifurcation value, and this would be another one, etc., etc. And for example, this cascade of period doubling, so doubling the period of the stable equilibrium, leads to a chaotic behavior, for example, right? So most of these successive bifurcations into more and more complicated dynamics, like we've been seeing also, lead to situations where chaos occurs. Today, we won't talk about chaos. We will look just very locally at one type of these bifurcations. So they are responsible for these qualitative changes in the dynamics. And we have a variety, a wide variety of bifurcations. So for example, we have saddle nodes, which are the ones we will look, pitchfork, period doubling, transcritical, and you just name it. And the interesting thing about them is that they can be seen experimentally, they can be simulated numerically, but they can also be analyzed from a theoretical point of view. So just looking at the equations and analyzing what's going on when the parameter changes, right? So they explain something that we observe often in real systems, which are these drastic changes in the evolution of the system, in the behavior of the system, right? And we could talk about many disciplines where bifurcations occur already from an experimental point of view or from an observational point of view. So the bifurcation we will discuss today is called saddle node bifurcation or fold bifurcation, or it has many names actually. And in a one-dimensional system, so we will concentrate just in f mu of x, where x is a real variable and mu is a real parameter. And the fold bifurcation occurs when the graph of f of x, by the way, I'm talking about discrete systems, not differential equations, although all of this can be also explained in the continuous context. But in this discrete context, fold bifurcation occurs when the graph locally, the graph of my function becomes tangent to the diagonal. So there is a previous situation where I have two cuts with the diagonal, and that means two fixed points, one of them attracting orbits nearby and the other repelling them. But then at the bifurcation value, the two orbits collapse into one neutral orbit, which in this case becomes attracting from the left and repelling from the right. And after the bifurcation value, there is no contact between the function and the graph. Therefore, there are no equilibrium points locally nearby where we had the other one. So the equilibrium points just disappeared. Well, they really didn't disappear. They went to the complex plane. So from a reality point of view, there are no equilibrium. However, it's like if the system remembers, so there's kind of a ghost. They are not here, but you can feel them, right? Because when you look at the transient behavior, you see that it may take really long to go from one side to the other side of the former equilibrium value, right? So it's like the system behaves like if that fixed point was still there, although it's not. So that's why we call it like a ghost. So this type of phenomenon, this ghost phenomenon, we can see it in many biology systems, models, right? As long as we have like strong nonlinearities. And as I said, the main consequence is that the lengths of the transients increase drastically. Really, this happens actually every time that we are near bifurcation, simply because the derivative of this fixed point at bifurcation is 1. So the map stops being contracting nearby, but it's still very near contracting. So even if orbits do not approach there anymore, they are still under the influence in this region with a derivative very close to 1. So transient lengths increase, but in this case, in the case of the fold bifurcation, we will see that they increase drastically. They increase a lot. Okay, so this is what we call this ghost effect after the bifurcation. So how much does this length of the transients, excuse me, increase is described by this power law. So it's been shown in many different models and papers, right? That the number of iterates that it takes to go from one side to the other fixed basically is proportional to the distance from the parameter that you are in from to the parameter to the bifurcation. Okay, that's 1 over the square root of this. Operate either among themselves or among individuals of the same species. Described theoretically for many models, it turns out that it's been only observed once experimentally, and that was not in a biology model, it was in a Duffing oscillator. So here is the paper where this experiment is described, and this data is really experimentally obtained, and where it sees this is the log plot, and one can see that it really fits this 1/√law. Okay, so what model is the one that we will discuss today? So I will just say very little about the model itself and its justification from the natural or biology point of view, because Giuseppe will talk about it in his talk later on in the conference. But let me say a couple of things, right? So it deals with, so it is well known that when the environmental conditions change, like increase on aridity, or basically what we summarize saying habitat loss, this can trigger some loss of stability. So a system that could have been stable to a certain point, when this reaches some critical value, then stability can be lost, and maybe we can even be led to extinction of some species, right? So especially in fragmented populations, this is very common. And there are many models that describe this, like, for example, the Levin's model, which is basically a logistic function with some death rate. And they also show some gradual changes towards extinction. So in that case, we would be speaking about a transcritical bifurcation. But if we allow for facilitation, so, or if there is facilitation, so if there is cooperation between individuals, this bifurcation is sometimes more drastic, because it's of this type that we just said, of a saddle node type. So is this updating correctly?
Well, we had just 1 minute of problems, but now it is working. Yeah, we missed
delay,
just
right?
some delay. Yeah, but now it's working well.
You think so? Because I'm not seeing the same in my screen than in my iPad, so I'm not sure. But
we are not seeing the facilitation model now.
So is the model there now? The equation?
Just the first one, the Levin's.
I thought
model.
so. Okay, so that's something, and there's something that is not working. Maybe it's the connection, or I'm really sorry. Let me see. I'll stop sharing. No. Wait a second, because I don't know what to do. 1 moment.
So perhaps you can. Do you have the presentation in your PC?
Yes. Okay, let me stop sharing and try again, and if not, I'll change method.
Okay. Okay, now we can see the slide.
Okay, yeah,
okay.
and it seems to be updating. Okay, so if we consider facilitation, then we can change this term x by the term x squared. In this case, we are considering a discrete model, and this is the model that we will be looking at, which is well, it's explained right here, right? So it's like a logistic-like growth, but so mu is this growth rate, the intrinsic growth rate of the species that we are looking at. We have a death rate that is density independent, and that is expressed over here, a normalizing carrying capacity with value 1, and then D will be our control parameter, the parameter that we will be moving, and this is the fraction of habitat that is destroyed, so that the carrying capacity is really 1 minus D. Okay, and this x squared term is the one responsible for the facilitation. So just observe that this is a time 1 Euler discretization of the continuous model that has been previously studied. But in the case that generations do not overlap, like annual insects or plants, it makes perfect sense to talk about the discrete model instead of the continuous one. So a good explanation, very interesting motivation for this particular model, although in the continuous world, is described in this article by Sardañez, Piñero, and Solé. Okay, so I will just move to the bifurcation, and let's look at the iteration, therefore, of this map, depending on all these parameters, although we will fix mu and gamma because that is intrinsic to the species. And let us look what are the changes when the habitat destruction increases. So if you compute the fixed points of this model, you'll see that x equals 0 is always a fixed point. That's extinction, of course. And then you have two other fixed points which have this expression that you see over here. And therefore, as we all know, this discriminant will decide whether this corresponds to two real fixed points, one double, or just no real fixed point, right? Indeed, this discriminant equal to 0 is the one that will mark this difference. And therefore, that is how we compute this bifurcation parameter, DC, that we call it, okay? The critical parameter or the bifurcation parameter, which will depend, of course, on the parameters of the particular species. So this will be our bifurcation parameter, and therefore we can look at what happens right before bifurcation, during bifurcation, and after bifurcation. And here it's not very easy to see. We'll see much better in the complex, but basically it's the same that we've been saying. So 0 does not play a role here, but these two other fixed points do. So first we have two fixed points, one attracting and one repelling, which collapse on a neutral fixed point and then simply disappear, okay? So looking at the bifurcation diagram of this system, fixing a certain value for mu and gamma that are biologically coherent, we can draw the bifurcation diagram from the real point of view, which means that we plot what are attractors of the system, right? So we see that if this is the DC, the bifurcation value, and we see that if the habitat destroyer is larger than this, simply every initial condition leads to extinction. Here at the bifurcation value, we have simply one fixed point which attracts from higher, if we have a lot of individuals, they may approach this neutral fixed point, but if they are not enough, they are extinct afterwards. And if we get small values of habitat destruction, then we have this bistable situation where 0 is a stable fixed point, but also there is another one which could give you an equilibrium for the system. We don't look at this side, which is the one that would lead to chaotic situations and other things that we are not concentrating on today. So in fact, we are going to now go imaginary. So let us see how complex tools can help us to understand this situation. So going imaginary helps in many real problems, real as opposed to complex. So also in dynamics. So for example, complex tools allow you for simple proofs of very powerful results in dynamics, in one-dimensional dynamics, purely real. So for example, the fact that every attractor needs a 0 of the derivative. A critical point is a 0 of the derivative, which means that if your model is a polynomial of degree 4, for example, you know that at most you will have 4 equilibria that are stable. Okay, this is something that it's not so easy to prove unless you go to the complex variable. Also, density of hyperbolic parameters for the logistic family. So knowing if the existence of attractors, when you look at parameter space, if this is the generic situation or if it's not. And also for the ones that understand this diagram, this is really a beautiful complexification in parameter space, careful. So these are complex values of the parameter that can be put together with the usual bifurcation diagram that we are all used to see also for the same family in the reals, right? So we see that this interval of parameters for which there is just one equilibrium corresponds to a whole bunch, an open set of complex parameters for which there is an equilibrium. Okay, every little interval from one bifurcation to the next, when you look in the complex, corresponds to a whole open set of parameters. And a lot of things can be proven using complex tools that then transfer back to the real situation. Okay, but this is maybe even a bit more complicated than what we are going to discuss today. So this has, apologizing, it's just this is extremely good. Okay, so complexifying simply means, since this system is analytic, it means real one. This is just cosmetic. But now let's review those graphs that we saw from the to the interval that one sees from the reals. And this is what you see when you open and look in the, okay, so 0 is our extinction equilibrium. Of course, negative values or complex values have no biological meaning, but looking at what happens in the complex does tell you something about what happens on the reals. So 0 would be this equilibrium, and every initial condition in red corresponds to orbits that tend to 0. Here we have the repelling fixed, and inside the black region we have the attracting fixed point, and black indicates initial conditions for which the orbit converges to X plus. So, oh God, because it's now stopping all the time. 1 second. Let me see if I can do something else. So let's see if this works better. No. This doesn't work better. You don't see this, right?
No.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it. Maybe I'll have to do that. This is unfortunate. Okay, one moment. Well, let's hope. Well, let's hope that it's that. Okay, so you're seeing these, I guess, now.
Yes.
Okay, and we can move to where we were, which was here.
Okay.
But
yeah,
if
now it seems it works.
Yes, does it work like this also in full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see if this works a little better. So it's just that I don't have a, well, you can see my mouse, right? No, you cannot see my mouse.
No. If you don't use the presentation mode, you show just the screen, then we will be able to see your mouse.
Yeah, but then, this is, then you see all the information at once. I'm so sorry. No, wait.
Don't worry, don't worry.
I really apologize. It's just that, well, anyway. Okay, let me see if I can share something else. Maybe the PDF itself. Okay, with the Acrobat, one moment. I mean, I had my presentation in 6 different places to just make sure that this would not happen. But everything that can go wrong goes wrong. That's obvious, right? So.
But
okay.
sorry to interrupt, Nuria. You are only able to show your mouse with a non-maximized presentation.
Also with the PDF?
Yes. So the only thing you can do is to use a non-maximized presentation, resize the window so that it occupies the maximum possible amount of screen without decorations, I mean, commands from Acrobat and such things, and then you can use the mouse. But in a maximized presentation, in more presentation, the mouse is not possible to see. I say this because in my lectures during the whole academic years, this has been a problem.
Okay, I've always shared my iPad, so I've never had to go through this, but it's okay. I will see now. So here we'll share this. This is the one you are probably seeing now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And now you can see my mouse at least, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just go where we were. It's okay. So I was explaining that this is the complex parameter dynamical space, right? So this little blue line is the one representing the real initial conditions and the real equilibrium. And this is before the bifurcation. So before the bifurcation, we have a good basin of attraction, which in the complex is an open set for this equilibrium state. And then, of course, another basin of attraction for the other equilibrium state. It's a bistable situation. In the moment that the bifurcation occurs, these repelling and attracting fixed points meet here at the point XC. And this still this equilibrium has plenty of initial conditions from the right which would converge to it. But this is a very unstable situation. Right after the bifurcation, we see a picture as the one that you see here. And what does that mean? This means these colors, don't let yourself be fooled by these colors. These colors mean that eventually everybody in color will be tending to extinction, to the equilibrium zero. It's only that they take longer and longer and longer to get there. So the colors respond to how many iterates you need in order to get in a neighborhood of zero. And let me just magnify this part just around the old XC bifurcation fixed point. So notice what happens when you magnify these. What you see is where these 2 fixed points went. They simply left the real wall to go into the imaginary one, but they are still very, very, very close to the real line. The real line, real initial conditions have to stay real. So they don't have any other solution than to just march through this tiny tunnel from one side to the other. And this closeness, the closer these 2 fixed points are to the real line, the longer it takes for these iterates to just cross from one side to the other. This is the ghost effect that we've been talking about. And what about these spirals? Well, these points, these fixed points, I think this is explained in the next slide. This fixed right after bifurcation, let me call it dc plus epsilon. So when epsilon is tiny after bifurcation, we have these two complex repelling fixed points, and their multipliers are complex. They have an imaginary part. We'll see that the imaginary part is the responsible one for this spiraling around the fixed points. In fact, this black is just fooling you. This black means that after 1 million iterates, we still didn't get out of this black region, right? The green, blue, etc. means that after a million iterates, we finally made it into the red, and white is iterates whose orbit will just be escape to infinity. So we are very close to orbits that do many different things, but in particular, most points stay basically forever or for an extremely long time around the new repelling fixed points before they just get away. So in this narrow channel, we have very slow dynamics, and the channel width, if you just plot it here, right, has to do exactly with the imaginary part of the eigenvalues. Okay, so logically, the closer, the smaller the imaginary part is, the smaller the channel is, but also this channel width has to do with epsilon, with the distance to the bifurcation value DC. And actually, if you plot it, we experimentally, or let's say numerically, one can see that the relation between these two quantities, epsilon and the channel width, is actually linear. It's like multiplication by 6 actually in this particular simulation. So to estimate the number of iterates to cross this channel has been done in many, as we've mentioned before, has been done in terms of epsilon, the distance to the bifurcation parameter. But in our case, what we do that is new is to do it in terms of the multipliers of these ghost fixed points that are living in the imaginary world. And from there, recover the scaling law. So the main theorem that we prove in our project, in our paper, is the following. We just say that basically is the estimate of this number of iterates. So the number of iterates that takes me to go from a fixed point, like let's say xc minus delta to xc plus delta, or vice versa actually, is something that can be estimated in terms of the imaginary part of the eigenvalue or the multiplier of these two fixed points. And so it's inversely linear from that. So it's 2 pi, it's approximately 2 pi over the imaginary part of the multipliers. And by studying these multipliers, one can recover the scaling law, because this imaginary part of the multipliers, one can see that it behaves basically like the square root of epsilon. So that these are the two different estimates. This is one that was already known, and this is the new one that we propose in order to estimate this crossing time from one side to the other. So numerically, we can plot these two quantities, so the iterates versus epsilon, or the imaginary part versus epsilon, and see that in one case is this 1 over square root, in the other case is the square root. So how do we prove this? We prove this using complex techniques, and we use, as it had been done before for the continuous situation, we use the residue theorem. Remember, to do the residue theorem, you have to really go into the complex, in the same sense of taking our path from left to right and completing these into a complex curve, closed curve, by going away and coming back to the real line. In this case, we chose to border the fixed point that is on the lower half plane, but it can be done in different ways. This is just simply because we are going from right to left. So we need to kind of estimate the integral over this path, which has to do directly with the residue theorem. But the novelty that we do here is to use something called the holomorphic index, which I'm not going to go into, but it's a very complex tool, complex as opposed to real, not as opposed to simple, right? Which simplifies the computations very much and allows you to compute this residue, okay? That we'll see that this has consequences at the moment of generalizing this, the model. So just to finish, let me say that we can also complexify the parameter, and so not even here, this is, so we can also complexify the parameter and obtain something similar to the picture I showed you at the beginning, so that we can, using this fact that critical point zeros of the derivative need to tend to one of the equilibria, we can see this bifurcation picture that we computed from the first moment from a complex point of view. So from the complex, what do we see? We see this extinction region as this black hyperbolic component here. All these conditions, all these parameter values, remember, this is a parameter plane for D complex. So for all these complex Ds, in particular for these reals, our only equilibria is extinction. And for all these green complex parameter values, in particular, these D values from 0 point something to 0 to the critical one, give you dynamical systems with an extra equilibrium that is stable, which is the one that we drew here. Okay, so this bifurcation coincides exactly with this one. This bifurcation here coincides exactly with this one. And to finish, let me say that the use of the holomorphic index actually allows us to generalize our study in for functions of a fairly general form. Okay, so any kind of analytic map for which the analytic both in epsilon and in the variable x, for which with some restrictions, but in particular it's a good generalization from the one that, as to our knowledge, was the only one studied until the moment, at least in these very general terms, of a saddle node having exactly this power law as a measure of the increase of transient lengths. So for families written like the one I put here, we can prove basically the same results that we have for our particular model of facilitation. And I will finish here just saying that my co-authors, Jordi, Luis, and Josep, we all had a lot of fun looking at this, and there are still many problems that we think it's interesting to go through. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Nuria. Despite the technical problems, I think that more or less we could follow your talk and the message, so thanks a lot. So we do not have any question. What we will do is to finish with your talk, and if there is some questions in 3 minutes, and then the break will...
Lucas. There is a hand raised called Lucas.
Okay. I haven't seen it. So you should send questions using the chat.
But I think he can put the microphone if he wants.
Okay, I'm not seeing the hand raised. Okay, so go ahead, Lucas.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Nuria. It was a great presentation, although the mathematical background is, well, quite heavy, but it was very simple to understand, and also to highlight the complex tools in order to solve problems in the real plane, which is the plane which biologists work. I had a really simple question regarding the complexification of the D parameter in the previous slide, if you may. So it's just a silly question. Here you explained how it converges towards the X point, or convergence to 0, or divergence, which when it tends to infinity. I just couldn't resist to ask, the yellow coloring, does it have any relation with time, with the number of iterations it tends to diverge towards infinity, maybe?
Perfect. Lucas, first, thanks for your nice comments. Second, the answer is yes. So the color here, sorry, I saw the watch and I saw it was so late, so I didn't stop too much here, and I obviously didn't make it very clear. But the coloring here is basically black, green, or a palette, that goes from red to yellow to whatever, right? Because that depends. So it's this one here, and that palette really depends on how long it takes me to go further than, I don't know, 200, for example. So yes, how fast the iterate of my critical point tends to infinity. Basically, these red values have no, I would say, have no biology meaning, but they do have it from the model point of view or the complex point of view, in the sense that if the critical point is going to infinity, this tells you that only the extinction is possible. So no other equilibrium can exist. So basically the idea is you have two critical points. That means that at most you have two attractors. So if one of these critical points is doing something else, like going to infinity, this tells you that there is only one attractor. And since 0 is always an attractor, it means that no other one can exist. Okay, but yes, answering to your question, yellow just means my critical point goes to infinity, but not too fast.
Also, I wanted to ask, I guess the parameter plane is calculated numerically in the sense that you iterate like a grid of values, of parameter values, several times, and then you measure the distance you've got in each iteration. So if the distance is greater than something, you consider it diverges. If it's really small, you consider it converges, etc. So
Yes.
my question is, this is like more like a technical aspect. Where do you draw the line? I know that by theorem and by complex analysis, you know what happens, that it diverges, but in the end, the computer does not know how to do complex analysis. So you have to draw the numerical line. Where do you draw it?
So for orbits going to infinity, it's really easy, because infinity acts as an attracting a super attracting fixed point, in fact. So if an orbit ever gets further than, let's say, 50, I'm saying this because this is a polynomial. If you had exponentials and so on, it would be different. But in the case of a polynomial, if your orbit eventually reaches, like, I don't know, modulus 50, in fact, much less, you already know that it can never come back. So this is a line that you put numerically that you know it's perfectly exact. Okay, you are not making mistakes there. Of course, the numerical line, you also put it at the number of iterations that you take to test this. So it's different if there will be points or parameters for which going further than 50 will take 3 million iterates, and those you will not catch. Okay, but really they are very, very close to these boundaries, and your eyes will not be able to see them. On the other hand, when you test whether it converges to a fixed point, right, then you do have to check the distance to this fixed point or the distance from one iterate to the next. And these I usually put less than 10 to the minus 3 or 10 to the minus 4. And that's usually more than enough, because these are, after all, stable equilibria. So usually you have an open set of values, the basin of attraction. And again, if you are close enough, you will not go back either. So really the only imprecisions are on the boundaries of these sets, which could be full of points which take long to do what they will eventually do. And therefore they don't enter into your numerical program. Well, have I answered your question, Lucas?
Yes, you did. Yes, it's you did answer, in fact, my question. Yes, the boundaries may contain, I know, infinite points, but they can be approximated by our eye. We just cannot see them, so it's okay. Yes.
Exactly. That's the short answer. Actually, yes.
Thank you, Nuria. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks again, Nuria, for this amazing talk. So now we will make the break, and we will start the next talk at 12. Okay, so we make a 10-minute break. So see all of you in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 12. Thomas, share the screen to check if everything is okay.
So let me. Is correct? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you can hear me also. Yeah.
Okay, so the next speaker is Tomás Lazaro. He's an associate professor at Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya. He's also a member of the Dynamical Systems group at this university. He's also a member of the Centre de Recerca Matemàtica, also of Institute of Mathematics in Tech, and he's also a member of the Dynamical Systems and Computational Virology unit that the CRM has with the I2CIS Bio. His expertise is in dynamical systems. He's working in reversible systems, differential equations and difference equations, limit cycles. And in the recent years, and this is I am the guilty one, he's interested in biological models. Okay, the title of his talk is Scaling Laws for Stochastic Ghosts Explained by Hamiltonian Dynamics. So thanks so much, Thomas. And you can start whenever you want.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you to everybody for being here. Let me also thank you all the organizers for giving me the opportunity of giving this talk. Just saying that the first thing, this is a totally ongoing project. So the results here are part of the work that we are doing, and we are still continuous doing for a while. And this has been done in collaboration with Tomás Alarcón from ICREA and CRM, Carlos Peña from the Laboratorio Subterráneo de Canfranc, and Josep Sordeñez. If I had to say,
sorry, Tomás, could you speak loud? Could you speak louder?
Sure. Probably it's problem of my. Okay.
Okay.
I should recuperate. Now, okay, it's much better.
Now it's much better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So sorry. I will say that this is an ongoing project, and also that if I had to put a second title or a subtitle for this call, I will talk about catching the ghost, because what we are going to do is something similar to the ghost that Nuria has perfectly well and wonderful explained in her talk, and how to deal with this ghost from a different point of view. And the idea is the following: I will try to put quite a lot of formulas, mathematical formulas, but my intention is, or my aim is to provide an informal discussion. So don't, I apologize for the formulas, but don't be aware, those which are not so used with the formulas, just keep in mind the idea, and I will try to be very informal when I speak. Okay, as before, we are particularly interested in one scaling law, which is those which is close to a system undergoing a bifurcation. So we are going to study what happens with the transient or flying times right after some fixed points disappear in a particular local bifurcation. Of course, if you want to know more about this topic, don't lose the talk of Blai Vidilla this afternoon, and also Josep Sordeñez tomorrow. But I will try to do my best. Okay, so let me start with simple things. So just consider this example of an ODE. Contrary to the case of Nuria, I'm going to be in the continuous setting. And the first thing we used to do with this kind of ODEs is just look for equilibrium points. That's the skeleton of the dynamics, which is a very simple thing to do. And the only thing you have to check is which are the points having this velocity equal to 0. Of course, one is always the origin, which for me will be in some sense extinction, and a polynomial of degree 2 that, as always, that we learn when we are just much younger, depends on the discriminant. If the discriminant is negative, there are no solutions. If it is positive, there are 2 solutions, and if it is 0, there is just 1 solution. And this is the case. So if this discriminant positive, that means this parameter mu is smaller than k/4. We are having 3 equilibrium points: x naught 0, x minus and x plus. And in the case that mu is equal to this critical mu, which is in my case k over 4, I'm going to have just 2, the origin, which is always, and this critical point, which is just the collapsing point between x minus and x plus. And if I take mu bigger than k over 4, there is only just one equilibrium point that is reign, which is the origin. Let me do it in a graphical way, and apologize because they are fast and homemade graphics, so I apologize for the poor quality. But the idea is the following: my dynamics live in this line, and if I take mu smaller than k over 4, I have 1, 2, 3 equilibria, and observe the dynamics around this equilibria here. X plus is attracting, so it's an attractor node. X minus is always a repeller. Observe that the dynamics is always far from it. It's going to or x plus or to the origin. If you move mu to the critical parameter, then these 2 points collapse in one. And it's a kind of saddle. I mean, in the right part is attracting, but in its left part is repelling. And this is always an attractor. And if you just allow mu to be larger than k over 4, there's only one that remains and attracts everything. And as before, one should expect that this total attraction by the origin should be, in some sense, quite fast. But it's not the truth. It's not really true, because there will be some phenomena that we cannot observe here, but we can control, or we can analyze, or can study if we look at more carefully. A typical way mathematicians use to plot or to do a graphic of this bifurcation is just to plot in this parameter line, of this parameter diagram. This is mu, and observe this is the point. This is mu c, the critical value, and then if we are below, we have 1, 2, and 3. These lines represent in some way if they are attracting or repelling. Then when we reach this value mu c, they collapse, still origin remains, and then only the origin remains at this all when attracting. This is called a saddle node bifurcation, because we have this saddle, we have this node, and they disappear, and it's just one remaining. Okay. Why this is interesting? Okay, this is mathematically, but do we have models in biology that can represent or can provide or can exhibit this behavior? And the answer is yes. For instance, assume that you are in a population dynamics model and you ask about the mean field of a population of replicators with self-cooperation. They auto-replicate, so auto-catalytic replication, undergoing some degradation and, of course, some intraspecific competition. So the first part, this is S, stands for resources that we are supposed to be limited. And this is A, and A, this means an element, an individual of my species. And then after this kind of chemical reaction-like model, we say that they replicate and they produce more. And this is for the degradation, and they undergo a degradation into resources. If you add to this part, observe that this part here, if you translate the first equation into my ODE language, this should be, the variation should be this, it produces this part of kx squared. Degradation is responsible of this minus epsilon x. And if I want to introduce competition, interspecific competition, the typical way is to do it by means of a logistic lie term, which is this part here. This is a typical one. Okay, you can normalize, so rename again all the parameters and the variables, and you can assume that mu is equal to 1. So if you put all together, the system that you have is this one here. That if you write, just expanding and manipulating, is exactly the same as the example I have provided just 2 slides ago, with mu, in this case, the parameter epsilon. Remember that in this case, the critical parameter is epsilon equal to 1/4. Okay, k is equal to k over 4 or k over 4 if you assume, for instance, k equal to 1. So my question is, assume that this is the critical x 1/2. If when I have mu larger than k over 4, but not too much, see, close, larger than this critical value, but not too much. And if I take variables here and a starting point here, which is more or less the time I need to cross this point, which is not there, but it should be, it was previously. Can I more or less have an idea of the transient time or the flying time? Of course, I know that the time I need to go to the origin is infinite, but which is the time I need to reach this part or to cross this part? Okay, so we can do more some computations. If you want, just take your ODE, put it in terms of the time, and then you iterate. X0 and XF are two values that you can choose. And you observe that if you write this in terms of this variable phi, which is just epsilon minus epsilon critical. So in terms of the U parameter minus the parameter where the saddle node bifurcation undergo. So if you write this, you have an expression of this form. And if you take x0, so a bit larger than xc, for instance, or x equal to 1/2 as you prefer, and you do phi tending to 0, so small phi, you can easily compute, you can easily see that this is of the order 1 over square root of phi, which if you want to write it in terms of logarithm means that this is the relation with 1 minus 1/2, which is the famous scaling law in this case. Or if you want this, or if you prefer this one. So this is the alpha equal to minus 1/2 that Nuria was referring in her talk. But in my case, I'm working with ODEs, remember. Well, this is okay. This is known. This is very interesting. But of course, if you talk to other scientists which are not so used to determinism, they can say, okay, well, how you can, oh, sorry, this should be another second example, which is also Hill equation, which is also undergoes the same kind of saddle node bifurcation. This Hill equation corresponds to the case of cooperative systems, in this case with two replicators. So what we wanted to say before is, okay, if you are talking to a scientist that are doing numerics, they could say perfectly, okay, you can put your system in terms of reactions. You can think if you want in terms of chemical reactions, why not? How do you know which is the reaction that's going to act in a given moment? How can you decide which one is going to act in just this differential of time? And then necessarily, you must go into stochasticity. Why this? Why should be determinism? Okay, if you want to plan, or if you try to do a deterministic, a stochastic approach to this problem, the first thing that you can do is just translate the relation between your particles, your individuals in your species, in terms of, if you want, of chemical reactions. So say in a stoichiometric formulation. So for instance, this should be for the autocatalytic model, the one we have been computing and studying in a continuous way. Here, these parameters R, J, they know just if they just help the population to grow or just make it to decrease. Observe that this should be in terms of OD, this corresponds to this term. In terms of OD, this reaction should be translated in this part, and this should be the degradation. So you can recognize here the main ingredients of my first example. If you do the same for the Hill model, you have something similar. So, which is the way to tackle this problem in a stochastic setting? I'm not an expert on this, so I will try to be as formal as I can and as say almost all the time the truth. Okay, so I apologize if I make some mistake. But essentially this stochastic approach, what I'm more interested is in determining the probability of having any molecules of some species at the time t. So we are going to deal with probabilities. And of course, the main equation that provides me this information, if I can solve it, is the so-called master equation that gives me, which is the time evolution of this probability. So the master equation is given in this form. So forget about the form. It depends on the previous states and also on the reactions. And then you have these parameters here, W, capital W, which are called the propensities and can be modeled if you use probabilistic theory in this way. Okay, C in this case stays for the system size. Okay, so let's go to this. How to solve this master equation? So in reality, to solve this master equation is so difficult that in general it's very hard to do it. And I don't know if it's analytically possible in the majority of the cases. But one possible case, this is in my case, the master equation, one possibility to approach this problem is to use the well-known Gillespie method. Okay, the method of Gillespie is, in fact, it does not solve numerically the master equation. What it does in reality is to numerically simulate or to numerically solve the marker process which is behind this master equation. And the way to do it is using Monte Carlo techniques. Okay. For this, what is necessary is to translate the stoichiometric formulation of the reactions, to use these reaction constants and compute with them some probabilities, and then provide with many Monte Carlo iterations to provide results, numerical results, which are really plausible. The problem with this Glsp method is that its complexity increases exponentially with the size of the system, and therefore this means that it has a very high computational cost. So what happens if you do this for one of our models? I'm going to concentrate in the case of the Hill model. And in the Hill model, this is some simulations done by Giuseppe. You can observe that this is let me explain because it's not so easy if you're not really used. This is the time to extinction. I mean, essentially, this is not related to extinction because it should be infinite, but this is the time you need to pass close to the XC. Remember this very narrow tunnel that Nuria explained to us in her talk. So it's the time you need to cross it. Okay, so this is the time. Observe that this is in terms of powers of 10. And this here, what we are plotting is phi, which is the distance to the parameter, the critical parameter. I mean, if we were here, we were exactly, this is not possible, but exactly on phi equal to 0 means mu equal to critical mu. And then if I move a bit, I can compute for a set of initial conditions. You can do also the average, the mean afterwards, which is the time I need to cross this part. And contrary that we expected from the deterministic approach, this does not follow a -1/2 law. But contrary to this, what is following is a kind of plateau. Observe, this is plateau. And then it decreases very fast. What does it mean? For this period, so for these values of phi, it means even you are not so far from the point where the bifurcation took place, the time you need is extremely long. This is a slowing down of the dynamics. Everything is very slow. Nuria explained very well to us. The tunnel is very narrow, so you need a lot of time to cross this tunnel. But we are not going into the complex. We are just doing from this stochastic point of view. And there are simulations for other things. So what is our interest? Our main goal or our main target of this job is could we explain this plateau, this slowing down in the dynamics, using deterministic or mechanical dynamics? Okay, how to do it? This is the famous ghost that Nuria referred in her talk, and also that Blai and Josep will talk more deeply, much better than me in their talks. Okay, so the idea is, can we approach these stochastic observation results from a deterministic point of view, and how do it? Well, observe that this is a master equation that you can rewrite in this form. This is my stochastic master equation with these step operators. And then the crucial point, the important point, and the novelty of this idea is, let us use WKB, so Wenzel, Kramer, Saint-Brévin, Einstein, for my probability function. Okay, so this method is very used, for instance, in asymptotics, when we try to look for a kind of solution that in many cases is not convergent, but can produce a very good results for a short time or for a short period or for a region in your space. And this is our answer. So let us think that our probability function can be expressed in terms of an exponential of minus omega. Omega is a constant. A function that I'm going to call action, you will see why, and something which is order 1 over omega. So it's an approximation. And impose that this P satisfies the master equation. And then expand everything in terms of omega, which is a parameter. And then just take this part, the part of the equation which corresponds to the lowest order terms in omega. What you get is that your S here, this S, that I'm going to call action, satisfies a Hamilton-Jacobi-like equation of this form, which is very familiar for those people who work on Hamiltonian dynamics. So if it satisfies this equation, I can think that that my system comes from a Hamiltonian interpretation with a Hamiltonian H that can be, okay, it's given of this form. Okay, well, remember that I or J corresponds to plus or minus 1, depending if it helps the population to grow or decreases the population. So if I think in this case, and I ask for P of this form to be a solution, what I can expect is that really these Hamiltonian settings, this Hamiltonian setting give me or determine the motion of a particle in my phase space, where x is the position, my previous variable, and p, be careful, is the conjugate momentum. This p is not a probability, it's just the corresponding Hamiltonian conjugate momentum to the variable x, okay? So let's go to this. I'm in a Hamiltonian setting now. So in my case, if this is the Hamiltonian, okay, if I take the case of the Hill equation, the omega, the small omega 1 and the small omega 2, they correspond to the Hill equation here, and this is to the degradation. Let me take k equal to 1 in order to simplify this position. So from this H, you know that the corresponding Hamiltonian system, is of this form. And observe that if you put P equal to 0, you recover the deterministic problem, deterministic equation. So in some sense, you are embedding your deterministic model inside a Hamiltonian setting. If you, in somewhere, some say this should be a kind of a singular problem, because for P equal to 0, you have a completely determined dynamics. But if you switch on P different from 0, even though it is very, very tiny, the dynamics is completely different, okay? So let's go for this, and let us try if we are able to recover this ghost, this plateau behavior, analyzing this Hamiltonian model, okay? Okay, the first thing you can do is, okay, you have an action. S is an action, so why not compute numerically an approximation of this action? This corresponds to the phase space of my Hill equation. Here in green, you observe the curve where the Hamiltonian is equal to 0. Also, the Hamiltonian is 0 is here in this x and also in this x. And the curve in red is the null line x dot equal to 0. And this is the null line, the one in yellow is the null line corresponding to p dot equal to 0. This is important because they determine the regions in the space where x and p increase or decrease. And this is important for our dynamics. Okay, so if you plot a numerical approximation for this action in these orbits, observe that those orbits having minimal action, those in black, they correspond, when you plot the corresponding probability, remember the probability, observe here, the probability is just the exponential of this value. So the closer s to 0, the closer is p to 1. So it's higher probability, okay? Which is very normal and it's very, you can expect it. So observe that in this part, this is the region where you can have with higher probability to stay and to remain there. And of course, it depends on where you are and the value, approximate value of your action. Okay, so let's go into this more deeply. This is just some orbits plotted of this Hill system with the case a equal to 1. Of course, something which is very important. Remember about the tunnel that Nuria explained to us in her talk. The tunnel is extremely narrow. In my case, or in our case, the tunnel is exactly this. If you want, you can plot this. This is the tunnel. You cannot see the tunnel, but it is. This tunnel is, his eighth is of the order of 5. I mean, if you start with 5 equal to 10 to the minus 7, this, there is here a small tunnel and a small bottleneck whose height is of this order, 10 to the minus 6, minus 5. So tiny, tiny, tiny. Let me just do a kind of a qualitative plot in order to observe and to study. So here it is. But keep in mind that this height here is extremely narrow. And how is the dynamics in my Hamiltonian system? Okay, the dynamics is the following. Observe, this is here, this is a saddle point. This point here is a center. Okay, this saddle point has an invariant curve. This the one part of its stable invariant curve just goes here. So it's a very narrow. So the dynamics is I continue here, I enter here, I enter horizontally because this is a null line. In this part, I decrease. So P is decreasing and X also. And then once I cross again this curve horizontally again, I go here. And then in some cases I can go to infinity, or if not, I can just come here and exit this bottleneck. This bottleneck is extremely narrow. So everything goes in this way. So what we expect to find, and this was our idea, is, okay, are we able to, oh, I think I have just 1 minute left, or 2 minutes left, very fast, Josep, I think.
Yeah, couple of minutes.
Sorry, a couple of minutes. Okay, so what we expect to be honest, what we expect was to recover this plateau-like behavior when iterating orbits with the initial condition here or close to A is the critical X, and looking which is the time we need to cross this part. Unfortunately, we do this, and what you observe, this is just taken, for instance, for any value of 5, you take 20 or 30 initial conditions, you compute the time the flight time, and also you do the average, and also you compute the standard deviation. And what you observe is this behavior. This behavior, you can check it, is almost exactly a -1/2 relation scaling law. So we are recovering in this part exactly the same as we observe in the deterministic case. And where could be our plateau? And okay, we have devoted many discussions and many days, and the plateau were, as always, beneath the carpet. So the idea is P, small p, is not necessarily, is not a probability. It's nothing to do with a probability. It's just a conjugate momentum, and it could be positive and it could be negative. And this detail escaped to us in the first moment, and in the second and in the third. It was in the fourth moment that we realized they could be. So we computed with the same idea, the flight time taking initial conditions on this segment until reaching this part. Of course, we could do more, but in this part we control which is the behavior of P and X, and we can bound them. And then if you compute this and you do in terms of phi, what you observe is this plateau and therefore this decreasing, which is the same as we observe in the stochastic approach done by Joseph. So the idea is, okay, numerically we know where to look for it. We know why in this part we must get again the deterministic case, and we have very important ideas. We are almost close to the solution. Why in this part we can prove analytically that we have this plateau. This is related with how to compute the time in terms of x variable. In this case, of course, the time depends on x and p. But the good point is that we can bound the behavior of p because we are before or right after this null line. So we know which is how is the variable p to behave in this part. So again, this is the end of this first chapter of our work together, and we hope that there are many things to do right after. So again, thank you very much for your attention. I will be happy to answer any question you have. So thank you very much, and I apologize for the delay.
Okay, thanks so much, Tomás. So we have a question by Ruben Perez Carrasco. He's asking, do you expect to observe different behaviors in dimensions greater than 1? For instance, in a two-species competition?
That's going to be interesting, for sure. The thing I will try should be to generalize the same idea. The key point here is to the answer provided by the WKB. So if we can do something similar in higher dimensions, maybe, but it's not sure because I'm not an expert in this part. If we were able to do this, of course, we can get a Hamiltonian because the scheme is the same. We have an action, we have a Hamilton Jacobi-like equation, recover a Hamiltonian, and then we could do this. The thing I don't believe is that we could be able to find an analytic answer for this, because it must be much more difficult. Even in this case, it's just one degree of freedom Hamiltonian. It's not simple. So in higher number of degrees of freedom, this must be very difficult in an analytic way. But numerically, it could be. I don't know, but it could be interesting to look for it. In principle, our target was to get it for just one case, the easiest case possible. I have explained the Hill equation, but you can do something similar for the autocatalytic system.
Okay, thanks so much. Just let me add some answer to your question. So we actually published a paper last year in which we found this change in the scaling behavior in terms of the mean extinction times. And we were analyzing this autocatalytic model that Tomás was explaining. But then some of the referees made us exactly your question. So what happens when you have dimension higher than 2? And what we did is to explore two-species hypercycle in which you have two different species with cross-catalysis. So here you have also a saddle bifurcation. And what we did with the Gillespie simulations, we obtained the same change in the behavior. So the deterministic system had the power law, and the stochastic system had this kind of flat behavior close to the bifurcation, and then it decreases in time. So yeah, you can check in my website. The reference is from last year, and you can have there are some explanations. The answer is to what extent dimension is affecting this delay of the because this is a local effect that is around where the equilibrium has collided. So in principle, dimension should not be change this behavior, but who knows?
Yeah, of course, analytically is I think something very different. I think that the difficulties you find doing analytically are much higher, so that's a big problem.
Okay.
That's really a real bottleneck.
Yeah. So Ruben is also asking, can the plateau be understood in terms of a mean first passage time out of the flat ghost?
Out of the what do you mean? If you are close to the extinction point?
So perhaps Ruben, you can turn your microphone on, and I think it will be easier.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Ruben. Thank you very much for your thank you.
So I was thinking, so in a less sophisticated way, probably, which is if you imagine the ghost as the point in which these two streams collide, you will have a very flat zone. If you think like a landscape and a ball moving in the landscape. And then you can think that noise then is in charge of moving the ball and the landscape is not doing anything. And then if you can think of this time of exiting this flat area, what is kind of controlling the time of getting out of the ghost. So if you can formulate a thing in this way, if it can maybe make the problem somehow easier, I don't know.
I don't know, which is really very when I listen to the talk of Nuria, mathematically, it is clear that even though your fixed points disappear from the real ball and they go to the complex, and then they produce this obstacle to the dynamics. What you're saying is, okay, let's do this. So essentially, you are doing the same, no? In a certain way. I mean, you take initial conditions close to this where it was supposed to be this critical X, and then allow the time to evolve. I think should be the same, no, or equivalent, a different point of view, but I think should be. If I understood correctly, your question, it should be.
Yeah, I think that Tomás Alarcón wants to add some comments to this question.
Yeah, well, I mean, the answer, Ruben, is yes. You can formulate this as a mean first passage time. You just need to sort of set some sort of tunnel region from where you want to exit, and then you can formulate it as a. In fact, the simulations are done
in this way. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Thanks, Tomás. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Ruben.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. So we have no more time. So thanks so much, Tomás, for your talk. And now we move to the next speaker, which is Immaculada Baldomà. So please, if you can share the screen to check everything is working. Okay.
No.
Okay. So Immaculada Baldomà, Immaculada is an associate professor at Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya. He's also in the Dynamical Systems group at UPC and also at Centre de Recerca Matemàtica. Her research interests are mainly integrability, invariant objects, KAM theory, planar vector fields, and she has also worked in more applied subjects such as neuroscience and celestial mechanics. So thanks so much, Imma, for accepting our invitation, and you can start whenever you want.
Okay, I'm very grateful to the organizers for having me here today. So let me start. I am afraid that it's a really mathematical talk. So I try to define every concept that I need. So let me, what I want to present are some instances where we can encounter this beyond all order phenomenon. So this will be more or less the outline. First, I will explain what this phenomenon means. And after that, we will move on the examples. So first, this is the phenomenon. It means that imagine that you have a family that depends on the parameter, and that you can think that the classical perturbation theory doesn't work. That means that the phenomenon that you are trying to describe is defining by a flat function. That means that a function that is whose derivatives are always 0. So this function is as small as any power of epsilon. Okay, so maybe you are more familiar with this setting, which is the singularly perturbed setting, with having two scales. So for instance, you can have this one here. This one, okay, which is the fudge system, which is equivalent by a new definition of time with to this other system here. And see that both are equivalent with epsilon is different from 0, but when we get epsilon equal to 0, we have a totally different system. This system here and this system here are not equivalent, and moreover, this system here is not equivalent to this one, which is the system for epsilon different from 0. Okay, so this is what we want to study. Maybe a popular tool to study this type of systems is the Fennekel geometric singular perturbation theory. And I write here a reference that I encountered just finding something that with some biological examples. That it's really well explained, and there is plenty of examples, and it's also the theoretical framework in there. Okay, so the first example that we want to study is beyond the Earth, is the three-body problem. It's a configuration of the three-body problem that have a saddle center equilibrium point that, which is called L3, with a one-dimensional stable and a one-dimensional and unstable manifolds. And we will see that this distance between these manifolds is exponentially small with respect to some mass parameters. So you cannot catch this phenomenon at any order of this mass parameter. So here you have some authors that also deal with this problem. And here my collaborators, which are Marc Giral and Marcel Guardia. So let me explain which is this the configuration that we take into account for this problem. We assume that the motion takes place into a plane. So this is a reduction. We also assume that, for instance, one body is a massless body. So maybe you can think that the sun, Earth, and asteroid. And also you assume that the two bodies with mass, are moving in a circular motion having the same period. Moreover, you can change the unities to assume that the sum of the masses is 1. And then the perturbative setting here is because we assume that one body has a mass which is really, really small with respect to the mass of the other body. So since the motion of the primaries is still known, the only thing that we need to take care is about the motion of the other, of the massless body. And then what we do is just to change the coordinates, moving with the primaries, such way that the primaries are fixed. And then the massless body, for the Newton's law, follows a 2 degrees of freedom Hamiltonian, autonomous Hamiltonian system. Okay, so we have here 2 degrees of freedom. So we have 4 variables: Q, the position, and P, the momenta that Thomas Lazaro mentioned in his talk before. Okay, so since we are in a perturbative setting, we see, okay, let's think in mu equal to 0. And when mu is equal to 0, what you have is that you only have one massive body. So we have a central force problem, and what you get is a circle of equilibrium points. So everything in the unit circle is a fixed point. Of course, when you consider mu positive, this circle of equilibrium points disappears, but they appear 5 equilibrium points, which are the L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, the Lagrangian equilibrium points. And the thing that we want to do is to focus in this one, in L3, the equilibrium point in here. Okay, so it's a linear analysis. Check that this point L3 is of saddle center. That means that it has 2 real values, one positive and one negative, and 2 purely imaginary values. And the thing here is that we have here 2 scales, because the purely imaginary eigenvalues, which correspond to the center character, are of order one, are constant. Meanwhile, all the saddle eigenvalues are of order square root of mu. Okay, so we have these 2 scales, as I said. When mu is positive, since it's not 0, then the general theory say that we have the stable and unstable manifold. Here you have 2 branches, the upper branch and the lower branch, which are symmetric. And these stable and unstable manifolds has dimension 1. They are solutions, so they cannot have transversal intersection. This is only a projection on the Q plane. Remember that we have 4 dimensions, positions and momenta. So these stable and unstable manifolds either coincide because are the same, or have no intersection. Okay. Sorry. So we want to check which is this distance between these invariant manifolds. So we take a section, we compute the intersection of the stable and unstable manifolds with the section, and then we measure the difference between these points. Okay, and it turns out that the difference is exponentially small, so it's a beyond all order phenomenon with respect to the square root of mu. So with respect to the absolute value of the saddle eigenvalues. Okay, these constants here are really different. This K is which is called a Stokes constant. That means that sort of you cannot compute, depends on the full jet of the Hamiltonian. So the only way to compute this for the moment is numerically. And this constant capital A is a known function, and we can compute a formula. We will see that this constant A is related with this ghost phenomenon that Nuria and Thomas speak about it. So let me explain a little bit how this ghost phenomenon occurs. So you use some classical variables, these Poincaré variables, and some singular scalings, and we can write the Hamiltonian in this form, which is an uncoupled system between the fast variables, see this here, this denominator here, and the slow variables. Yeah. So the slow variables are 1 degrees of freedom Hamiltonian, and you can draw the phase portrait really more or less easily. And then we realize that we have this homoclinic connection. Okay, this 0 here corresponds to L3. This homoclinic connections corresponds to the upper branch in the stable manifold here. And this one the other one, sorry, the other homoclinic connections correspond to the upper branch. So we, for instance, we can think in the right branch here. Yeah. So what happens is that this homoclinic connection is a good approximation of the invariant manifolds. And moreover, we can prove that these invariant manifolds, which depend on time, of the time of the system, are analytic in some complex strip. Yeah, this capital A here. Yeah, and since the invariant manifolds are solutions of the systems and are analytic in this complex strip, then the difference is also analytic in the complex strip with a bound that doesn't depend on mu. And moreover, and this is important, they are the difference, for instance, the difference of the x variable is a solution of a linear homogeneous differential equation, like this, with this mu here, which is a fast rotation. Yeah. So this difference, this delta x, is something like this, with this constant c here is a constant, and is it doesn't depend on a mu, or if it depends on mu, it depends smallly. Yeah. So since this difference is defined in this complex strip, we can evaluate the difference in the points I capital A, yeah, and then we get, see this is the trick, this exponentially big quantity, yeah, but we know that the difference is bounded, so this constant t has to be exponentially small, yeah. So see that if the constant c is exponentially small, when t is a real value, that is the values of time that we are interested in, then the difference is exponentially small. Yeah, and here is the ghost. These values of these complex values are nothing but the singularities of the homoclinic connection. So we see this homoclinic connection in the reals, but its behavior in the complex affects to the reals again. Yeah. Okay, so we expect that this phenomenon allows us to prove chaos by using this breakdown of these invariant manifolds for some breakdown in the Lyapunov orbits of L3. But this is work that we have done yet. We haven't done yet, sorry. So let's move on to the second situation. In the second situation is that we really prove chaos. So we give sufficient and computable conditions to guarantee the occurrence of chaos in some generic unfoldings of some singularities. I will explain it. And here you have also a list of authors that have dealt with this problem before. And here my collaborators that are Oriol Castejón, Santi Ibáñez, and Tere Martínez. So let me explain first the setting, sorry. So we think in families of vector fields in R3, such that when the values of the parameters are 0, we have that the origin has associated the eigenvalues to purely imaginary eigenvalues and also the eigenvalues 0. Okay, and then we will call that x00 sorry, is a Hopf-zero singularity, and the full family is called an unfolding. Okay. So the mechanism that we use to prove chaos is to prove the existence of Shilnikov orbit. This Shilnikov orbit also was mentioned by Luis in his talk, and it's just imagine that you have a spiral, yeah, here you have a spiral here, and also you have, since you have another dimension, this R3, this is R2, this is R3, and imagine that you have here some instability, yeah. So in this case, if the unstable manifold, which is of dimension 1, come back to the fixed point, then we say that we have a Cherenkov orbit, yeah, which is an homoclinic orbit. Okay, moreover, what is really well known is that if the eigenvalues of the attraction, yeah, of the focus part, just say, and the values of the saddle part satisfies this condition here, then the system is chaotic. You have Schmidt horseshoes, period doubling, and transverse intersections, and so on. Okay. So encounter these families of these homoclinic orbits leads to chaos. Okay, so what do we do? The first that we do is just write the systems, these unfoldings, in an appropriate way. For that, we use changes of variables, that is this normal form procedure, that kill as much as steps as you can. So we have that the unfolding, in fact, can be written up to some order k plus some reminder. This is the reminder, yeah? So for instance, for k equal to 2 in cylindrical coordinates, what we have is that the system is exactly like this, yeah? So see, this is a really easy system, so we can study the equilibrium points of these systems, and then we realize that we have 2 equilibrium points that are these ones here, pole north and pole south. And only when mu is positive, when mu is negative, you don't have, at least that B is negative, but for mu positive, you have these equilibrium points that have, again, see, 2 scales eigenvalues. So here you have this mu, which is a small parameter, and here you have this part here, which is of order 1, yeah? And moreover, we have the real part that depends on both parameters. So in order to have a saddle focus equilibrium point satisfying the condition that we need to prove chaos, we need to impose these open conditions that only depends on the x0, x00. So only depends on the singularity, okay? So from now, we assume these open conditions. And then let me say what happens with the normal form of any order, okay? So the thing that the normal form of any order is exactly like this here. And see, this is in fact an uncoupled, because the behavior of zeta and r doesn't depend on the behavior of the angle, okay? So what we have always in these systems is that we have one-dimensional heteroclinic connection. This is why R equal to 0, which corresponds to X and Y equal to 0, is always an invariant axis, okay? So we have here the north pole and the south pole, which are equilibrium points, and the unstable invariant manifold of the north pole coincides with the stable manifold of the south pole. And this happens for any value small enough of mu and nu. Okay, the same. With respect to the 2 invariant manifolds, because remember that you have saddle, which is the corresponding to the one-dimensional, and we have a focus that corresponds to the second, to the 2-dimensional invariant manifolds. What happened is that the 2 invariant manifolds either coincide or do not intersect. So And what we can see is that, in fact, it only coincides with the parameter with the parameters belong to some curve in the parameter space, okay, which is in the picture. So see that the only possibility to have a Shilnikov bifurcation is that these unstable manifolds come back to the North Pole. So in any normal form, we don't have no Shilnikov bifurcation, no Shilnikov orbit, sorry. So we cannot use the normal form to prove the existence of Shilnikov orbits. The only possibility is that when we consider the full system, which is this normal form plus some remainder, then this heteroclinic connection disappears. Okay? So, but here we have the problem, and here we have the beyond all order phenomenon, because see what happens. This S minus are of order square root. Remember that when we compute the equilibrium points in the normal form of order 2, what we have is that this North Pole and South Pole were of order square root of mu. Yeah? And moreover, mu has to be also of this order, square root of mu, because if not, we don't have this focus character. Yeah. So the thing is that the difference between the full unfolding and the normal form is less than any power of mu. So that means that this breakdown of this, if this heteroclinic connection disappears, the distance has to be of less than any order of mu. And this is exactly what happens, and with that we can prove that the distance between these two invariant manifolds is in fact exponentially small. Again, in square root of mu. Okay, and this constant k is also an Stokes constant that you can compute also more or less numerically, but the thing is that generically is different from 0. Okay, so then using more or less classical arguments, Bolzano, inclination lemma, and classical tools, we can prove that if this distance is not 0, then we have a curve in the parameter space such that the corresponding unfolding has a Shilnikov homoclinic orbit. So you have chaos in these unfoldings, and the unfoldings close to them. Just let me say that we can also deal with the distance between the two invariant manifolds, which has also an exponential term here. Sorry, and using this formula, we can also deal with the volume preserving case, which is more or less sort of Hamiltonian plus saddle. Yeah. So moreover, in this generic case with mu and nu, such free parameters, sorry, then using this formula, we can get better knowledge of the curve gamma, where this Shilnikov orbit occurs. Okay, so just this is the second setting, and finally let me explain the third one. I have time, Giuseppe.
Yeah, a couple of minutes.
Couple of minutes. Come on. Okay.
Come on.
So if I have a couple of minutes, just say that we also have this work, which deals with a class of reaction diffusion systems, and we studied the existence of rotating spiral waves. And we relate the existence of this spiral wave with the fact that some quantity has to be exponentially small with another quantity, okay? So here you have also a list of authors and my co-authors that will be angry with me because I have no time to explain properly this problem. So let me say that these spiral patterns can appear in certain chemical and biological systems, like the ones I write here, and that are governed by the reaction diffusion partial differential equations that are functions in here. And this is the nonlinearity, which is the reaction nonlinearity, and D is the diffusion matrix, the spatial diffusion matrix. So what we have is that to encounter these spiral waves, so the spiral waves are nothing but solutions of this form, okay? And then we can encounter these spiral patterns that are really nice to draw, just simply by taking the level curves of the solutions. Sorry, and since we want to study solutions of this form, we put these solutions in the reaction diffusion equation, and then we get that they have to satisfy some a third order system of ordinary differential equations. And just let me say that in order to have this Archimedean spiral, this form of spirals, we need to impose also some boundary conditions. And the thing here, and I will stop, the thing here is that when you have a third order differential equation, we can only impose 3 boundary conditions or 3 initial conditions, but 3 only. And we need here 4 of them at least, okay? And these are more or less qualitative. So the thing here is that these 4 conditions suggest that this parameter here, K, which is related with this in here, has to be selected in some way. And the thing that happens here is that the selection of these parameters lets us to say that this zero at sorry, that all the derivatives with respect to Q are 0. So at the end, what we have, I skip this, no problem, is that this parameter is also exponentially small with respect to the twist parameter. Okay, and these constants can be computed. So I will stop here. I don't want to spend more time that I have. So thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Sorry, yes, I want to thank one thing to one person, which is Stefan Banach, which is well, I think Stefan Banach by his fixed point theorem, because it's the core of our proofs. So I didn't say the technical part, but it's about this fixed point theorem. And to you for your attention.
Okay, so thank you so much, Immaculada, for this nice talk with where we have been able to see that your research in manifolds and dynamics has many different applications. So we have one answer by Thomas Lazaro. He's asking, in the first example, does reversibility play any important role in the computation of the values A and K of your asymptotic formula? Breaking symmetry would produce any qualitative difference?
I think that here maybe the symmetry is because you have these 2 branches that are symmetric, so you don't have to compute the difference between both branches, but only in the upper branch. but I think that it's, I mean, in this case, yeah, well, in fact, yes, because we have some cancellations that maybe are by symmetry and are really useful for us to have this cancellation. So maybe, yes, you're right.
Okay, so there are no more questions. So thanks again, Inma, for your talk, and thanks to all of the speakers during this morning session. So now we will make the lunch break, and we hope to see all of you at 3 o'clock.